M&A madness, overcoming MSSP integration challenges following an acquisition, and avoiding security monitoring alert fatigue. When do you escalate to your client? That and the latest news and trends in the managed security space coming right up on Cyber for Hire. Building bridges between managed security providers and their clients, it's the podcast where MSSPs, VCSOs, and end users take a united stand against cybercrime. This is Cyber for Hire. All right, welcome friends to episode number 26 of Cyber for Hire. How's everybody doing today? I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media in New York. Joining me today, just a 4.5-hour drive away on I-95, is my guest co-host for the day, Bill Brenner, with a brand new title since the last time he appeared, Senior Vice President of Audience Content Strategy at Cyber Risk Alliance. Congratulations to you on that, Bill. Bill, yeah, absolutely. Now, when this episode airs on Tuesday, it will be the 4th of July, so also happy birthday to the USA. Any fun plans, Bill? Are you a barbecue and fireworks kind of guy on the 4th of July?
I will be blowing stuff up with my kids, and we'll be having a good time doing it.
Awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, I don't personally too much mess with fireworks because I always have these memories as a kid of having that uncle who did in the backyard, and then resulting in people's clothes basically being, singed.
I am that uncle.
You are that uncle. Okay.
I'm that dad. I'm that uncle.
There you go. Yeah, I distinctly remember a time seeing like rockets basically go like flying towards people into the seats and narrowly missing them. So I've lived those days, and at this point, I'm just happy to sit back and watch one of those Grucci fireworks displays from afar. But all right, more banter on that later. But first, some news just can't wait. Which is why we want to share what's top of mind today. So here's your headline, courtesy of SC Media and its parent company, Cyber Risk Alliance. In conjunction with SC Media's June 2023 Vulnerability eSummit virtual conference, the CRA released the results of an online survey of security and IT professionals on the topic of vulnerability management. Among the chief obstacles impeding effective vulnerability management are old legacy systems, the inability to automate, and lack of complete visibility of all IT assets. In fact, only 51% of respondents approved of the way that their organization has decommissioned legacy IT in order to ensure proper patch management. That was based on a rating scale of 1 to 7, where only the numbers 5 to 7 are considered positive scores. Bill, why in your mind is this report top of mind, and can you relay a couple of best practices or key takeaways that came out of the research?
Yeah, I think, vulnerability management is as old as cybersecurity itself, right? So people who are in the profession are dealing with the same challenges that they've always dealt with. So around prioritizing, around automation. Automation is this holy grail that nobody ever quite seems to be able to get their hands on, despite what's on the market. And, when you look at the last 3 years, where companies dramatically increased the business that they do in the cloud, that has just created a threat landscape that's just so much bigger. And so the question is, how do you improve your vuln management game to keep up? And that's the big challenge. We had respondents who said that they continue to have trouble getting budgetary buy-in from the top to do what they need to do. Visibility has become so much harder because companies that are doing business in the cloud are carrying around so many third-party applications. So there's just so much out there. Um, in terms of what to do about that, we actually did interview a series of CISOs and other respondents about the path forward. And some of the lessons learned that respondents talked to us about was, for starters, tying vulnerability management to the business. Stressing visibility and ownership across the business, continuing to advocate for the availability of services. I'm going to read a quote actually from one respondent because we just get so many useful comments. But one respondent said, vulnerability management should be lumped in the bucket of keep the lights on as operational support for the availability of your products with customers. That's the way we've approached it from day one. The DevOps team and the software engineering and IT teams are really good at keeping customer-facing services up to date or N-1, and that same process supports patches and updates. So that is one perspective. Another perspective was around changing behavior, where another respondent said the hardest thing is in helping folks change their behavior to think about what could be built into their automation templates. So other lessons learned, we had respondents talking about their journey to being able to better prioritize vulnerabilities, learning to translate the impact of risk exposure better, having more agreement across the organization on priorities. So which items are your crown jewels that you have to prioritize at all costs? But what are the things that can be lower in the priority chain? And that's hard because especially now that we're doing so much in the cloud and there are so many third-party applications in the mix. So prioritizing is hard, but it starts with really identifying which systems in your business are the most critical and dedicating the bulk of your efforts towards finding vulnerabilities there and remediating them. And then in terms of some more basic best practices, things we've heard from respondents, start with the known knowns. Don't worry about what's happened in the past. Identify your knowns, build processes for them, and then figure out what you can improve going forward. And once you've developed that solid workable process that meets some of your minimum viable product characteristics, you start preparing folks, getting them comfortable. And the other thing was going big on zero trust, which has been a challenge in and of itself for a lot of organizations because zero trust isn't this one size fits all solution out of a box. It's basically a collection of, it's a philosophy really, that has several pillars attached to it. So it's really figuring those out, because when you're in more control of who has access to what, it's a lot easier to contain the range of vulnerabilities that you have to watch out on. Other tips included include objectives that raise awareness of your VM policy, making quantitative-based decisions, and being realistic about what you can and can't control. And that goes back to the point about what are the key systems that your business relies on, and putting most of your efforts there.
All right, great. Excellent stuff. Particularly interesting to always hear some of those quotes and commentaries from the IT and security professionals themselves. So I appreciate you sharing some of those insights today, Bill. And that's going to be our top of mind hot take for the day. But now it's time to move on to our MSSP industry trends topic of the week, presenting our big idea in business, M&A madness, overcoming MSSP integration challenges following an acquisition. Last year, Channel E2E listed more than 1,000 merger and acquisition deals involving MSPs, MSSPs, and other similar service provider organizations. Typically, when any M&A deal occurs, there are bound to be redundancies and overlaps in services, tools, and personnel. For MSSPs that find themselves in this situation, it's important to consolidate and integrate the best of their assets across multiple entities while maintaining operational consistency. This is no small task, but this segment will offer examples and tips to help move in the right direction. Leading us through this discussion today is our special guest, Jim Broome, President and Chief Technology Officer at Direct Defense. Jim is a seasoned IT veteran with more than 20 years of information security experience in both consultative and operational roles. At Direct Defense, he is responsible for the day-to-day management of the company, as well as providing guidance and direction for service offerings. Previously, Jim was a director with Accuvent Labs, and before that, principal security consultant with Internet Security Systems and their X-Force penetration testing team. All right, well, thank you, Jim, so much for being with us today. And as always, we're going to jump right into things. And I thought a good place to start might actually be for you to recount a little bit of your own personal mergers and acquisition experience that you went through to help illustrate your point and to show what some of the challenges can be. Tell me a little bit about some of your personal experiences in that area. And then as we go through some of the additional questions, I'm sure that experience will factor into some of the various answers that you'll be giving us as we seek additional perspectives.
Sure, no problem. And thanks for having me on today, guys. Starting with the tagline of seasoned professional, hashtag I'm old. So the gray hair is real. It's not a dye job. In my case, literally goes back to some of the earliest days in the industry for myself, which was back in the 90s. With going from a company called Netrix. We were actually one of the first resellers of Checkpoint Firewall 1 in the industry. Actually, my wife and I were actually the ones that were primary authors on the certification program and traveling the world. But we were actually one of the very first managed service providers back in the day when it was just managed firewalls and building those models. And we ultimately got acquired by a company called Internet Security Systems. And that company was one of the first vulnerability scanners on the market, one of the first commercial IDS IPSs on the market. So not only were they a product vendor, but also had a service line, and ultimately, tongue-in-cheek, IBM acquired them for the managed service offering that became Global Networking Services. So I kind of have a career, completely on the service side, maybe more offensive sometimes, more defensive sometimes, but I've gone through several acquisitions being an employee as well as helping organizations when I was at Accuvent, actually acquiring and building new service offerings with them and trying to go to market with those new services as well. And most recently with Direct Defense, once we started the company for ourselves. So if we want to talk about pen testing model, managed services model, managed vulnerability management models, we can definitely go down the weeds in each and every one. So it's been an interesting ride.
I feel the last 20 years flashing before me.
Exactly. Yeah.
I so clearly remember all of that when IBM moved in and just the whole.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, candidly, I like to coin that time and frame, directly to today's theme and topic is the major challenges and hurdles when you go through acquisition. Number one is going to be culture, always will be, and you've got to be prepared for that as a business owner and a business decision maker. trying to merge two organizations that have, in some cases, diametrically opposed procedures, and trying to come up with a common blend, all the way up to your service delivery model. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, Bradley, with you may do this tool this way, you may have done it that way. So like today in the market space, there's a lot of challenges, if you will. I tease today's term MDR, managed detect and response, is the new DLP. You go to 20 different vendors, you're going to get 20 different answers. And one of the things is, all right, let's level set. We acquired, or if you're the acquirer or the acquiree, there was an acquisition based on something. Either it was headcount, intellectual property, go-to-market strategy, or augmentation of your service offerings. So you need to, number one, identify culture and how you're going to start, really starting to merge those organizations. But number two, understand what is the end goal here. Is this an intellectual property acquisition? Is it a go-to-market strategy acquisition? And then start, if you kind of sitting down and level setting with the team of how are we going to do this? What's our time frame in the market space? And how do we actually continue maintaining our customers before we merge our customers?
Yeah.
All those come into play. And in an ideal world, you hope you're on a 6 to 12 month cycle. Sometimes it's even longer.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you brought up the question of what is the nature of the acquisition, because that was something I even wanted to ask you about, because really there are different types of M&A transactions that we could be talking about here. This could be the case of two MSSP type organizations merging. It could be an MSP acquiring an MSSP to get those security services in its portfolio. It could be an MSSP taking on a consulting organization or a solution provider to give it more internal capabilities. Are there certain M&A scenarios that pose more challenges than, or are more complex than others to execute in terms of getting aligned with culture?
Honestly, it's really going to be, what is your differentiator, how you perceive yourself different from the other folks, and what is your go-to-market strategy. If you take the traditional MDR players that came out in the market in the first couple of years, they were really all geared around endpoint. We're going to manage your CrowdStrike. We're going to manage your, SentinelOne, whatever, endpoint, platform, because honestly, that's where a lot of bad things happen, and it's the first point of visibility for many security organizations that are struggling to get visibility. Eventually, those have adopted and matured, and you still see, again, going to market against other competitors out there. That's their entry level service, and so when you start qualifying your customer and talking about your customer base, we have this, but that's really not the enterprise service. The enterprise service is this. So when you talk about the M&A process, like, all right, what was the acquirer's process? What is the acquiree's process? And then what is the time frame, to really to kind of start mapping out of when are we going to merge this as a unified service offering? When are we all supposed to be wearing the same T-shirt in the building and really going to market to our customers together? We've seen this. I think the last truly visible one in my experiences was both TrustWave and SecureWorks, when they started going to enterprise MDR, EDR, or XDR, whatever DR you want to apply to it, in their service lines, that you literally saw some of their acquisitions kind of step forward and like, here's the old traditional stuff we've been doing, but we're going to put this team forward. And that was the quickest way to get the market. Is we believe this team already has a maturity model to delivery. We know what the inflection of the pain points are going to be to get them to a volume that we expect them to be at over 12 to 36 months. And that's the investment that the business is making that decision on, and how to accelerate that or get to market as fast as possible with something that could be perceived as a very viable service opposed to what they've been doing. So, the old adage, and we see this time and time again in the vendor space, it's easier to acquire than innovate, right? So in most cases, at least monetarily. So, in those cases, it's easier to find, a service group that's right on that cusp. Maybe you have a wealth of cash or a PE or, venture capitalist behind you to help you acquire someone that's bigger or prepared to make a bigger jump than you are, and then allows you to join that force and augment that service. If you take a look at the OT space, we saw a lot of that in the last few years from organizations like Accenture that went on a rapid hiring spree for OT, not only security professionals, but OT SOC offerings as well in the market space. So you can definitely kind of know that competitor and know what the market strategy is when you start talking about the M&A of, are we trying to accelerate? What is the end game? And that really helps you build your decision models from there.
I would be curious to ask you, Jim, what redundancies since we talked about sort of paring down and consolidating those, what in your mind are some of the most common ones to crop up? And then once we identify those, then maybe we can talk a little bit about what the step-by-step process is or best practices for paring those down and consolidating those services.
Sure. Let's take the biggest ones and the most painful ones first, which is as a service delivery model. When you talk about MDR, MSSP, you really got three major things you have to deal with: case management, so your intake of whatever you're managing. Number two is going to be ticketing management and how you're actually interacting not only through your case management process but back to your customer, and finally reporting. So in most cases, that's really a technology standpoint. You're going to look between the two organizations, which one's doing it right at each phase. Which one can we optimize to adopt whatever their model was, and try to find a way to merge those sources. And that, honestly, I can tell you, through collective friends and everything, that is the biggest challenge across the board. If there's going to be a perceived fail merger between two entities, it's right there. It's how they go to market and deliver their services. Honestly, without tooting our own horn, we decided to build some intellectual property for my company to kind of take on that challenge for ourselves. But taking that out of the equation, just basically sitting down and trying to level set on how you're going to actually merge. Are you a ServiceNow company and that's your primary portal for case management of this, or did you build something? Great, how busted is it? And then what you'll find is someone either slapped a Jira ticketing system in the middle of it, or a ServiceNow ticketing system, or something else. But then they've got that case management front end that they all custom built for themselves. And again, your service model may be 100%. Threat hunting. Your service model may be more compliance oriented and bigger picture items. So how do we get those new ticket types into that system and to try to logically flow that out? I mean, honestly, the good news is I've done app testing. I have some really excellent, app testers that I work with day to day. And so 9 times out of 10, we literally sit down and do diagrams of just how is data flowing in and out of the system? How is the architecture of this going to work before you even add the human element into it? And once you can figure out there, you can figure out ways to optimize and get to market faster with those problems.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the human element. So, I mean, that actually was going to be my follow-up, which is we just talked a little bit about how to handle redundancies and overlaps in tools and processes, but you're also inheriting people when you acquire another company, and then you want to make sure that basically all of your employees now that fall under the banner of your organization are all performing within the expectations that you set forth as an organization, and that's going to maybe now affect the way that some of these new people that are coming in interact with your client base. So how do you, again, make sure that you stay on the same page in terms of making sure that all employees are following the same basic guidelines for how you expect customer interactions to go forward?
Yeah, exactly. And then directly, it kind of goes to when you go through an acquisition, you're acquiring teams. Doesn't matter if it's consultants or analysts, it's human. So sitting down and taking your most senior talent and honestly, this is how we've been doing it. How do you guys do it? Just literally just be that transparent with everybody. Like, what is your interaction? What is your touching points with your customers? I know I use it as a sales tactic when I'm competing against other people on the sales side of, hey, you hardly, the most common story is I never heard from that company. So like, how do I get that out of the culture? Because we're high, my process is highly touching to the customer, making sure that they have a constant, communication point. And so if that's not the process that team has been aware of or used to, you're probably going to find some skill sets, deficiencies in there as well that you need to go bolster. And nine times out of 10, it's all soft skills. It's not technical. It's like, hey, can you talk? Are you okay being in front of a room full of people and actually, being the authoritative person in the room in those conversations, all the way down to how well do you write? And so honestly, I can tell you, I spend quite a bit of time just in my own organization, just showing them how to use Office, just basic, Office communication tools, because unfortunately the current generation is all about Google Docs, and that's a different rant. But it's just showing them how to communicate, how to orchestrate. But more importantly, be open to being open to what you've done before is not necessarily what you're going to be doing tomorrow. I'm always been a big advocate of, hey, I probably built it for you. Here you go. Here's the owner's manual. From this point forward, it's yours. So if this doesn't work for you, this was, the process by me. This needs to be the process by y'all, by the rest of the organization to actually establish how you want to go to market together and as effectively as possible. So again, it's a lot of collaboration and really just kind of sitting down on the human factor. Eventually you're going to identify some redundancies, and that is unfortunately a byproduct of just the entire process that may have to be resolved. The good news is also, I have 3 other lines of business. So, that's open for that talent to look to see if they want to progress to a different line of business. Like maybe they want to be a pen tester. Maybe they want to be in compliance. Maybe they want to specialize in OT security. So again, it's kind of being open to what are the acquisition models, what is the career path, and just being very, very transparent, to employees. I found today, especially current employee culture, they really respect that and just really understand that transparency of, hey, this is a business, but at the same time, I'm trying to make sure you guys have a successful career moving forward.
Jim, just continuing on here, I know that from a when a merger and acquisition does happen, we've been talking up to this point about customer-facing systems and services that you inherit. You also, as an organization, of course, end up inheriting internal systems as well from whatever this new company is that you're merging with or acquiring. Everything from HR systems to just really any kind of really internal business function. So can you apply the same principles to consolidating internally your systems as you can to the customer facing ones? Can that, at least for efficiencies purposes,
I'm definitely a big advocate for yes, you can. Again, the acquisitions I've seen to be the most successful is, again, a lot of transparency, sitting down and like, all right, maybe you guys are using a PEO, maybe you're big enough, you've brought the task of HR management in-house. What is your plans? What is your procedures around employee vetting? Because ironically, we serve a lot of different verticals, so we inherit by proxy a ton of different obligations to work here. I make the tongue-in-cheek joke here is, I have federal, I have financial customers, so yes, I'm a business in Colorado, and we still do drug screening. I'm sorry. So it's an obligation to work here. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see that culture coming in. It's like, no, this is a real thing. We still have to actually be big boys and girls and actually go to work, and make sure that we understand our customers are have obligations on us as well, and make sure those ecosystems are maintainable and scalable. For me, it's always been the inflection point when you talk about the back house on HR. Once you break 100 employees, that's really when you really have to start investing into your own infrastructure. So having a true HR role, having a true operations manager, having a true accounts payable system. So, the money still flows. No hiccups on cash, because I can't tell you how many failed ERP implementations I've seen, especially in VARs. And just kind of going through that whole process of, can we continue to, send our invoices out? I mean, I literally have seen spectacular failures where one company acquires the other, thinks they got it. They ultimately term the other organization's accounts payable department because they all thought they had it, and now they're failing to send 30-40% of their monthly billing. And then secondarily is failing to acquire the intake. So thankfully a lot of people have gone to ACH transfers these days, but there's still a lot of people that use checks. And unfortunately, you may have terminated the person that actually physically goes and checks the mailbox. So, I've heard horror stories of someone finally checked the mailbox after 2 months, and there's, $500,000, $2-3 million of checks that have been waiting to be cashed. Thankfully, I'm a details guy, but I've seen, that's really my biggest thing as a business leader. It's just sitting down. I was like, all right, what is your procedures? Let's document them. If you don't have documentation, and just make sure we're covering and checking on all the things we can. And then how do we actually ultimately integrate and try to take the best from each side? So.
Absolutely. And I think a good one last question that I wanted to make sure to ask you was, I think it's good to illustrate for those watching or listening today what the potential consequences or ramifications are if they don't follow some of these best practices, if basically they allow some of these inefficiencies and redundancies from these various dealings to linger, and if really they're not on the same page across the various disparate entities that comprise this increasingly complex organization. So for those that don't follow your sage advice today, Jim, what are potentially the short-term and long-term consequences down the road?
Sure.
Data
So on
breach.
the data breach, yeah, that too. Let's take it top down. So on the service delivery side, yeah, there's a gap. There's you've missed something critical. So there is a byproduct of you missed the most important check. So quality of service, quality of delivery. That's why you ultimately have your KPIs and your procedures to actually see who's working effectively, either with the old process or the new process, depending on what side of the equation they're on. Honestly, my biggest sample set I always go back to is I ask the customers how's their experience been in the last couple of weeks. So you're actually checking in as a manager, as a senior person in the company of what's the customer experience been. Because I'll get answers that not necessarily my sales team or my own delivery team. Like everybody thinks they're doing good. You talk to the customers like, well, I really like so and so, because it is a personality business as well. You put this new senior leader on the project, and just there's not a really good gel. That may be something, maybe a little bit of retraining, but honestly, sometimes people don't get along. Hey, it's fine. Maybe this person's going to be better with this customer, so you can do a tangible swap out that is low key for both parties. There's no harm, no foul. It's just more of a, hey, you guys aren't gelling. It's okay. It does happen. To Bill's point of, you had a technical deficiency and now we have a oh crap moment, working with a customer to this transition to an incident response. That's knock on wood, haven't had that myself, but I have seen it. Been part of it as the pen tester of really ringing the bell and escalating all the way up to like screaming and shouting outside the front door of the SOC with I'm a hacker, and still not getting the attention that they need to draw that. So that's a process failure. So you're going to have to go back and identify why the process failed and actually put your checks and balances in there, first and foremost. All the way to the back of the house, and I gave you kind of the horror stories, but number one is just keeping the cash flowing for the business so it actually gets through this acquisition properly. But the biggest one is culture. If you can't successfully merge the two, then you're going to wind up with a poison environment that the glass door reflects it and everything else that reflects it. That even as a CEO or CTO of the company, you're sitting down talking with employees personally, like, hey, what could we have done better? Just be open. It's like sometimes we don't have all the answers. We try. We do our best. We've seen it and leveraged our experience, but it's humans. It's human nature to fail from time to time and learn from your experiences. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, great. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of those thoughts and insights with us, Jim. And obviously, again, this is something that a lot of organizations go through at one point or another. So it's best to be prepared in terms of understanding what could be coming their way. So glad we got to talk about that for a little bit. Yeah. Before we let you go,
Jim.
though, Jim. Yeah, absolutely. But before we let you go, Jim, we're going to still actually ask you to hang around for one more second, because we were hoping that you would take part in a spooky little segment that we like to call What Scares You? As we've mentioned on the show before, the cybersecurity world is full of Chicken Littles out there who are constantly warning us that the sky is falling, when in reality, some threats are over-exaggerated. Of course, that's only some threats, because there are times when the danger is very real. So this bit is an opportunity for us to gather around the virtual campfire and hear from the experts on what keeps them up at night, what gets their spidey senses tingling. And so, Jim, I ask you, what scares you?
Honestly, it's being complacent. This industry has a really bad habit of, we solved it. And thankfully over the last 20 years, we've kind of gotten out of that process, but there's still a lot of it that exists out there. Just most recently, the threat actors have been very interesting in their change in MO. When you think about how we defend on the blue team side, we're looking for EDR solutions. We're looking for other process tracking solutions. We've got this really cool integration with the cloud, and we're looking at users that are being compromised, things like that. And without a doubt, the old school stuff still hits us. Case in point, organizations that are still using text messaging as a multi-factor option. There is several threat actors that are highly skilled at this point of targeting cell phone companies, and literally walking into brick and mortar stores and SIM swapping phones. That gives them that first point of entry into the organization. So the clock's running. Do you have a process to have your employee tell you their phone's acting weird? Probably not. There's a time delay built in that, all the way up to most recently seeing the threat actors actually stop running exploits. They're actually living at the infrastructure level. They're living in your cloud at the highest level. They're not touching the actual VPCs and logging in, where we have our really cool EDRs and all this other stuff to catch them. So you have to really work and re-gear your visibility to just taking care of the infrastructure and the visibility and that ecosystem as well. All the way up to even watching vendors like Microsoft struggle with the volume of attacks they're seeing and having to deal with their own IR teams now in the recent spat of, I don't know if you've been tracking them, but they've been hiring a lot because of a certain technique that's it's a truly a bypass in their platform. It's a challenge to recover. So it's been interesting to really kind of sit down and like, hey, we think we got this, and being complacent always kicks you in the butt. So that's usually what keeps me up at night.
Bottom line, don't be complacent. Don't rest on your laurels, because certainly the bad actors, they're not doing that. So good advice. And that's going to wrap up the first half of our show. Thanks one more time to Jim Broome of Direct Defense. Really glad you could join us today. As for everyone else, please return for the second half of our episode featuring our big idea in security, avoiding security monitoring alert fatigue. When do you escalate to your client? That and more coming right up, so we will see you in a moment on the other side.